Hey everyone, my name is Matt with We're in the Rockies, and in this video I'm going to give you 10 essential tips for visiting Yellowstone National Park. These tips come from my 30 plus years of experience in visiting the park, as well as the most common questions my viewers have asked me. The first tip is to understand the layout of the park. Yellowstone is a really big park, so big that it has 5 very different entrances to it. Though the park is mostly in Wyoming, 3 of the entrances are in Montana. The most common entrance is West Yellowstone, Montana, followed by Gardner, Montana. The southern entrance actually connects Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. The least used entrances are on the east side because these are found in rugged mountain terrain, and the gateway cities are far away from the highlights of the park. However, they are the most beautiful entrances, and both are accessible from Cody, Wyoming, which is a great little town worthy of 2 days of vacation time in its own right. All these entrances lead to the Grand Loop Road, where almost all of Yellowstone's main attractions are found. If you want to know more about Yellowstone's entrances, see the description below for articles I've written about each one. One more thing. Notice the Easter egg in the map, where the east side looks like the profile of a bear's face. Okay, the next thing is to stop and fill up on gas before you enter the park. There's 2 reasons to do this. First of all, there are plenty of gas stations within Yellowstone National Park, but probably a little cheaper to fill up before you enter the park. And secondly, it'll give you a chance to clean the bugs off your windshield from your drive to the park, which will give you a better view of Yellowstone as you drive through. Okay, now the next thing to do is to not visit the visitor center when you come to Yellowstone. So this goes against all the advice I normally give on national park videos, which is always go to the visitor center. They have great displays. The National Park Service does a really good job. The rangers are super helpful. You can ask them questions. You can get scheduled for the program or for the ranger talks that day and all that. Yellowstone is kind of different. It's weird. It's so big that they decided not to build like a big main visitor center for the park because there's 5 entrances, and so it's just spread out. So what they did is they created little ones all over the park. This one here is in West Yellowstone, and it's really kind of unusual because it's actually run by the Chamber of Commerce here in West Yellowstone, but then half of the building they have available for staffing by the National Park Rangers. There's virtually no exhibits are in there. There's no movie. It's really nothing at all to stop at. So it's really kind of weird. Yellowstone, this world-class park, really doesn't have much of a visitor center. So anyway, unlike other parks, you don't stop at the visitor center on your way into Yellowstone. Just make sure to get your pass online ahead of time, or you can buy it at the window as you're going in. Okay, the next thing to do is to bring a picnic. I've got my sandwich and apple and water here, and I'm eating at this beautiful picnic area called Nez Perce Creek. And this is the thing about Yellowstone. You need to understand there is food everywhere, okay? There's like 11 restaurants, a bunch of gas stations and little shops, and you're never really that far away from food. However, it is a big park, and you don't really want to like stop what you're doing and drive over to a restaurant and then drive back. It doesn't really work that way. So it's better to be prepared with a picnic so that you can eat when you are hungry or when you're ready to eat, even if you're out doing something. Now there's a bunch of picnic areas all over the park, and they're just beautiful. It's just so great. Most of them are next to rivers. You can eat right next to the river. It's fantastic. This particular picnic area is called Nez Perce, and this is actually where the US Army chased the Nez Perce Indians through this area, through Yellowstone National Park in 1877. This was 5 years after Yellowstone was created a national park in 1872. So there were actually tourists here in the park when the Nez Perce came through here being chased by the Army. Some of them were actually taken captive by the Nez Perce Indians, and I'm not gonna tell you what happens because it's in my audio guide. You'll have to get that to find out the rest of the story. The next tip is to give wildlife its space. Every year, Yellowstone hits the news due to people getting attacked by wildlife. The most common attacks are from bison, and this is usually, if not always, because people get too close to the bison. Over 4,000 bison roam Yellowstone National Park, and unlike bears, they hang out in areas where there are tourists, such as in the middle of the roads, campgrounds, or geyser basins. Bison are deceiving because they are typically stoic and appear to be as lazy as cows. Generally, bison are harmless until they're not. The park's rule is to stay 25 yards away from bison and elk and 100 yards away from bears and wolves. We've seen plenty of people get closer to these animals, and while the chances of an attack are still minimal, all it takes is once, and you could end up in the hospital and all over the news. Okay, the next thing is to know about bathrooms. We got a lot of questions about bathrooms in Yellowstone. So here's the deal on the bathrooms. At all the major stops where there's gas stations and visitor centers or whatever, there are flush toilets, plenty of bathrooms and all that. At almost all of the trailheads and geyser basins, there are these plop toilets. And so you need to understand these are plop toilets. Now, remember that with COVID, like everybody is short on staffing, right? The National Park Service was short on staffing even before COVID. So you can imagine how well taken care of these bathrooms are. They're not really all that fun to go into, but they are available just about everywhere you go in the park. Okay, the next thing to do is to be bear aware. So if you're gonna do any hiking off of the beaten path and get out into a forested area like this, you need to know, at least have some preparation for how to deal with the bears. Yellowstone and Grand Teton are grizzly bear country, so you do need to be prepared. You don't need to be afraid, but you just need to be prepared. Now, most people are gonna hang out around the geyser basins, the boardwalks, and the really populated areas, and you really don't need to worry about bear spray in those areas. But if you get out into the forest like this, it's a good idea to bring it. Two things to be aware of. Number one, when you're hiking around, if you're kind of alone like I am right here, I did this hike all alone, nobody was here. I was making a bunch of noise to let the bears know I was coming. Our assistant Linnea, she says she thinks of it like knocking on their door to let them know that you're coming in. So they don't like to be surprised. So you just want to be making noise. Some people will wear bells. The other thing is, it's not a good idea to hike alone like I'm doing. That's a bad idea. Most of the attacks and deaths in the national parks come from people who are hiking alone. Now, again, don't be too afraid of it because there have only been like 8 bear related deaths in Yellowstone National Park since its founding in 1872. Bear attacks are super rare, but most of them do happen with solo hikers who are off in the woods who don't bring bear spray. That's the final thing, is that you want to bring bear spray. You can rent bear spray here in the park. There's a bear rental station at Canyon Village. You can also stop at any of the stores like the gas stations and general stores and buy bear spray there if you want. You can also buy it online before you come. You want to know how to use it, so we did a whole video for you about how to use bear spray, and we compared different types of bear spray and showed you us spraying a teddy bear with the bear spray. So you can check that out if you want to be prepared, but just be bear aware. Don't expect to avoid traffic jams. So traffic jams come in all shapes and sizes in Yellowstone National Park. The most common is probably bison jams, where bison literally just walk out in the road and stand there. They just stand there and block traffic. It's the funniest thing because they just act completely oblivious. They don't care about you. My mother calls them inconsiderate buffalo. So we call those bison jams. A lot of times the rangers will come and clear out those bison jams. What's up, guys? Oh, poor. Okay, now the next thing that might cause a jam is what we call a bear jam. These were the original traffic jams in Yellowstone because people would actually stop to feed the bears out of their car. I've got a whole story about that in my audio guide for Yellowstone. But people would actually stop and feed the bears from their car. By the way, if you want the audio guide, it's on my website, we'reintherockies.com. Anyway, today we call them bear jams if people are just stopping to look at the bears. Bears rarely, stand in front of the road and block the traffic, but they will be off on the side and people will stop and stare at that bear. I mean, because everybody wants to see a bear that comes to Yellowstone, right? So if they see one, it is going to cause a long delay and a bear jam. Okay, and then the third thing that could likely happen is just simply construction. They're always having to work on these roads. They get a lot of damage because most of the year is winter and it seems like they're always doing construction on the roads in Yellowstone. So be prepared for some traffic jams of one form or another at Yellowstone. Okay, the next thing to do is to ride a bike. Yellowstone's not really known as a biking park, but I have found a lot of joy recently in bringing our bikes to the park. There are plenty of areas, kind of short little trails that you can ride on the bike, including around here at the Upper Geyser Basin. Let's hope I don't fall over while I'm doing this. At the Upper Geyser Basin, there is a road, like a paved track here. It goes out to the end of the basin where you can see Morning Glory Pool. And it's a great way to get around and see some of the geysers here. Remember that there are more geysers here at the Upper Geyser Basin than just Old Faithful. There's plenty erupting. As you're walking around, you'll see them going off all over the place. So a bike is a pretty fun way to get around pretty quickly. And by the way, you can rent these at the Old Faithful Lodge while you're here at the Upper Geyser Basin, and that would be a great little family activity. Okay, the next thing is to visit the Old Faithful Inn. This thing is spectacular. It's huge. It's like the biggest log cabin in the world. Built in 1903 and is just spectacular. Behind me here is this huge fireplace. You can see up into the rafters. This thing really is a treasure, and it has even a little haunted story to it. So if you stop in here, ask them for the story, but they also do tours of the Old Faithful Inn here. So even if you're not staying here, come in, check it out, do a tour, and learn a little bit about it. I cover this in my audio guide, but this is a really cool building that you can actually watch Old Faithful erupt right from the deck of the Old Faithful Inn.